This is the story of how we got from here to here. This is the first of a bunch of 1 hour real-time mixes that I'm going to be putting on YouTube. It's going to be me mixing a tune from scratch that I've never heard before for 1 hour, and I'm going to explain everything that I do as I do it. Now, there is going to be a long and a short version of this video, so make sure you're watching the right one according to what time you've got. If you have got any suggestions about what I should mix next, write it in the comments. And if you've got any questions about what I'm doing, write it in the comments, all right? And if you want to help me out, like the video and subscribe to the channel. This first one is me mixing a DAWless jam. Now, if you don't know what a DAWless jam is, look it up. But it's not when you leave the door ajar in the studio. It's basically making electronic music with hardware, but no computer. All right, so you've got synth samplers, sequencers, loads of cables, and you're pushing buttons and there's flashing lights and all this kind of stuff. And it's really cool. It's getting more popular now. It's kind of quite a refreshing alternative to staring at a screen all the time. And of course, it was the original way of making electronic music before computers became dominant in that field. So this is Frank. Frank's an old friend of mine. He's been a DJ for ages, but he's only recently got into DAWless jamming and music making in general. So check out his channel, it's really cool. He's putting videos out every week of him exploring with his new synths and samplers and whatnot. This tune's got a bit of an acid techno vibe to it. I hope you enjoy. At the end of the video, I'll put the full playthrough of the finished track. Okay, so this is Frank's tune. The first thing I'm going to do is find out what is on these tracks, because I've no idea. And then label them up and then colour them in. So let's do that whilst listening. Find out what it sounds like as well. Okay, so the first thing I'm noticing is that there's a lot of overlap in the mid-range and especially in the low mids, and there doesn't seem to be a lot going on in the upper mid-range area. So it's a case of finding out what's important to be in those ranges and what isn't, and allowing the sounds that are important to come through, and the ones that aren't, kind of suppress them in that region and let them flower out in a different region perhaps. Also, the stereo image is dead mono, because it's all been recorded as mono tracks and they're all just panned down the middle, so it is dead mono at the minute. But I don't think that panning stuff around the stereo image is going to work that well, because these kind of sounds aren't really meant to sound like that. So what I will do is use stereo effects on the sounds. If I do pan them, I'll pan a copy to the other side and maybe affect them differently. Some modulation effects that work in stereo and delays and stuff like that, like some filters that are going to work in stereo. Generally jazz it up, make it sparkle, make it spread out the frequency range and move a little bit. There's nothing really down the bottom apart from the kick drum and the what I've called the bass squelch note, which is that kind of sort of bass one note pad that comes in here and there, which is kind of fine for acid, to be honest. It doesn't really need like a fat bass line down the bottom. Those are my immediate thoughts. Some compression on the overall signal would be good as well, to kind of help glue the sounds together. So I'll start off by putting something on the master bus to get the kick drum kind of pulling at the whole mix a little bit and making the sounds interact. Then I'll go for some EQing and spatialization effects on some of the sounds, and then we'll see where we are after that. What I'll do is just highlight this area of the tune where it was all starting to kick off, and I'll just use that segment for getting some basic effects, and then once I've got everything sort of sitting in a good place in the stereo field, then I'll go through to the whole tune and see what I can do about the sort of macrodynamics, microdynamics as we go through the tune, and make different parts louder and quieter at different times. So you can see there, this plugin's quite handy actually, the API 2500 clone, because it's got a automatic makeup gain on it. So when you add it, it's not just adding additional volume onto the sound, so you can immediately hear the effect of the compression. You haven't got to muck about setting the makeup gain because it does it automatically. So when you turn it off and on, the volume is the same. So what you're actually hearing is the effect of the compression rather than the change in volume. So you can hear there, as soon as I dialed in this release, the whole mix started to pump a little bit, which is kind of what you want really, because that kick drum's really driving the rhythm, so that wants to be pushing that compressor back and forth and kind of sucking the mix in and out with it, but very subtly. So I want to get to the point where it's kind of obvious and then back it off a little bit with intensity. But first of all, yeah, it's just setting this, I'll set the attack to 30, so it's nice and long, ratio of 3, and then I'll bring the release back in from 2 seconds. It's probably going to be there where I left it there. So you want the compressor to attack the kick drum, and then by the time the next kick drum hits, you want the release to be short enough so it's opened back up and it's no longer compressing when the next kick drum hit sound. That will give you that kind of back and forth. Okay, I think 0.1's a bit better, but it might work out to 0.2 if I back off the threshold and the ratio a little bit, so we're compressing it less. I'm liking it on 1 there, I think, because of the ghost notes and things on the kick, or the double hits on the kick. I think if you go up to 200, it starts losing them out. I think 100 is nice. I think if you go down to 0.5, it's just a little too kind of pokey and sharp sounding. This acid sound, I'm going to let it sit in the middle, this, because it's sort of one of the key components in this type of sound. But what I'm going to do is brighten it up a little bit and add a little bit of reverb into it, and maybe some subtle delay to kind of make it sound like it's filling up the sound space a little bit more. But I'm not going to sort of send it wide or anything like that. So let's try that next. That's giving it a bit more atmosphere. Maybe I got a bit too much reverb on there, but so basically, look, I started off with a delay, with a stereo delay. I tap tempoed it. I've just got it to one crotchet basically, which is 433 milliseconds. Turn the feedback right down, set it to ping pong, so it's going left to right, panning the delay from speaker to speaker. That gives me that little bit of stereo movement. But then I turned down the mix here, which was on 100% wet to begin with, right the way down to sort of like 20%. So it's mainly the dry sound coming through on this bus here, but then it's going to the reverb. So I'm sending to the reverb mainly my dry sound with a bit of this delay mixed into it. So it's getting the dry sound, but it's also getting this kind of spatial information into the reverb as well. And then on top of that, I've put a one knob driver. Well, here's my reverb. It's kind of slightly trashy sounding reverb, which I quite like for that kind of thing. And this one knob driver, which is basically just a bit of overdrive. So essentially it's a kind of overdriven reverb, which sounds like this. Which is quite nice. And I also EQ'd it a little bit just to bring a bit of brightness out of it, which is around about the cut-off frequency. I'll probably come back to that EQ a little bit later, but that'll do for now. It gets it kind of poking out in the region that I want it. So essentially this is the central feature of the tune, like after the drums. Okay, let's have a look at this bass up now, and then some of the other sounds like this pad and things. You can hear quite a lot of mid-range information in there. It sounds a little bit dull. It could do with a bit of saturation on there possibly, a bit of distortion or EQ or something like that. I don't think I want to pan this one around too much at the moment. Keep it quite central and kind of make it slot in with the drums a little bit more. So I think some compression would really help it stay present there. Okay, I think that's okay for now with that bass up. So what I did is I compressed it, which is a little bit tricky because it's coming in and out of volume on a more macro level, as well as the individual attacks of individual notes. So the amount of compression is varying according to how loud the sound is being turned up and down. So it made it tricky to judge where to set the compressor really. So I was basically just twiddling the dials and using my ears essentially, trying to set attack and release times that sounded good, while making sure that it's always compressing at least a little bit, even when the sound itself is being turned down. So essentially every attack of the bass is being dealt with by the compressor in some way. And that just evens it out nicely, and it sort of brought it up with the drums and kept it consistently there. Then next up, I put this PrigTech EQ on there, which is a really nice characterful EQ. There's nice fact, yeah, adding. All I did with that was boosted it by 5. I don't know if that's 5 dBs. I don't think it is. I think that's just 5 out of 10 of how strong it can be. So it's at 5 and at 100 hertz. So that's just giving it an overall low end boost. And then I've gone in afterwards with a Pro Q EQ to do more detailed EQing. So this is just giving us a general low end vibe, and then this one's doing all the detailed work. So I've scooped out a massive bit of mids there because it didn't need to be there really, to be honest. And it's just clogging up the sound of the other instruments. Swept it down the bottom so there's nothing below 40 hertz. I cut out a little bit here for the kick drum, which is 70 hertz. It seemed to be where it was wanting to be cut out. And then I thought about raising it there, but I didn't in the end. I've turned that one off, so that's not doing anything. And that got us from here to here. Okay, so we can move on now with some of the other sounds. What's catching my attention next is the drums, mainly the hi-hats. Now that we've brightened up other areas, they're sounding like they're sitting back a little bit, and I want those hi-hats like much further forward than they are. So sharpen them up a little bit with some EQ. I'm not sure if the drums need compression, to be honest, because the compression on the main bus is acting mainly on the drums. But other than that, it will be time to get some stereo sounds going on with some of the other layers. So there we go. I ended up adding some bottom on the kick drum as well. I just couldn't resist it. I'm sorry. A little bump at 60 hertz. 2 out of 10 EQ power points for that one. And then in the high frequency, I was trying out different frequencies to pull that hat out of the mix. I ended up going for 8K, which was a more aggressive tone on the hats, I'd say. If we was around 12 here, it was nice and bright, but it was a bit sort of papery and thin sounding. And then we went up to here at 16 and boost then. It was nice and beautiful up at the top end, but there was no real like oomph to it. Let me show you before and after with the drums. So it's really squished the kick drum down into the bottom of the sound stage, and it's pushed the hi-hats up. So we're occupying a much bigger frequency spectrum. which is lovely. I think it sounds great. So let's do something with this alien sound here that's coming in every now and then. It's sort of like a cymbal sound, I guess, like a reverse cymbal type sound. So let's see what we can do with that. I'm not entirely sure what I'm going to do with it other than push it around the stereo image and try and make it sound interesting. So let's see what I come up with. Okay, that seems good for now. So what I ended up doing is putting this timeless delay on there, which is a really cool delay. There's so much you can do with it. There's so many presets on there and so many complicated modulations you can do with it and stuff. It's quite mind-boggling, but I found, as we're doing a quick mix, I found a nice preset on there called Beauty, which gave me a nice bit of right to left stereo motion with the sound. So I sent that to one bus. I put that on one bus rather, and then I created a separate bus for the reverb, which I wanted a nice, bright, long reverb for that to kind of give me the sound of someone drawing a sword from a scabbard in like a really bright concert hall or something like that. And then I put some flanger on there just to try and make it sound a bit weirder. And we went from this to this. in the context of the mix, that gives us a nice big space that we're in. It gives us that feeling. And because it's not constantly happening, it's a nice extra dimension of interest to the tune. Right, let's have a look at this fizz pad now, then see what we can do with that. I think there's some low mids clashing in it, and I think that's definitely something that we could sit really wide, so it's kind of, so it feels like it's coming from both speakers separately rather than in the middle and pushed out. A few different ways that we can do this. A nice way I like to do is using a stereo delay. Okay, that's starting to get me the effect that I'm looking for. And what I did there was get a dual mono delay. When you're setting it up, use couple, so then it will use the same settings on left and right. So essentially it's acting like a normal stereo delay. But when you've got the right settings in the right area, which for me was a very short feedback and a very short delay, because I don't really want a delaying effect. I'm just using it as a means to separate the time of arrival for the sound in either speaker, to give it a sense that it's coming from there and there rather than there. So once I got that ballpark, then I uncouple and then I slightly unset one of the delays so it's out of sync, just the delay time, so it's out of sync with the other delay, and then that starts to give you two separate sounds rather than one. Let me show you. So there they're set the same. That's quite a nice effect, I think. What I think I might do is compress these sounds and perhaps tie the sidechain into another sound so they're kind of interacting a bit more with what's going on around them. Okay, that seems good for now. So after I changed that delay, I bunged on there an API graphic EQ, the 560. Why not? I took a load of bottom end out of that, so that kind of sound before the fizz pad was kind of suppressed. It's still there, but it's a more throaty kind of mid-range sound, and that helps it not clash with the bass sounds and the kick drum. So you can still definitely hear it's there, but it's a kind of like it's a more distant low frequency sound. And also pushed up the upper mids about 4K as well, just to make that kind of crackly fizzy pad sound a bit more kind of jabbing in your ears. And then after I bunged on there this Arturia FET 76 compressor, again, why not? It's not the kind of thing you'd associate with this style, but it sounds quite smooth and I like it. So I put it on there, and that kind of helps it kind of stay in the forefront of the sound field. So yeah, I want it quite ear grabbing. So it does that job. So let's try before and after. First of all, before. Then after. You can see it's a lot more intense, and in the mix it kind of sits a lot better and you can hear everything that's going on. Okay, so we're starting to get there now. The track's sort of come to life quite a bit. What I would go into now is these other sounds. I haven't done anything on them yet, so I have to EQ them and compress them. No, that's not really the right attitude. Instead, I would say that they're not really doing much. They're not really giving much to the track now. So I'm going to try and work out how they can fit around these other sounds and how they can really sort of make their mark on the track, really. So I think with this bass squelch note track, it's getting quite lost, isn't it? 'Cause it's clashing with all the other subby sounds. So I give it some brightness, definitely. I'm thinking of it like a bit like a baritone sax in a big band setup. You can't really boost the low end on it because it just sounds weird. So you kind of need to emphasize that throaty kind of brightness to it to give it presence in the mix. I think it's a similar case here. So I might also add some modulation to it, or a very, very short reverb, or maybe delay even, just to give it a kind of second skin and a bit more of a dimension tonally. think I've done what I can with that for the time being. I think it's going to be the type of sound that you call sort of bringing in and out when it's most needed, really, because during these dense sections it's really hard to get a sound like that to cut through with all the other kind of bassy sounds. Oh, so what I did on this bass note, I compressed it first of all with this same compressor, used the attack and release settings to get that brightness at the front of the note. So it's got a very fast release and a very slow attack, so that gives you kind of quite a bright sound effectively. It's only compressing slightly, just keeping the volume a bit more in the region where we need it, and then a bit of EQ, nice and simple, big push around 1k, it's 1154 there, and then chopped out some bass here at 89. I didn't want to sweep the bass, to be honest, because I want a bit of sub to come through, especially when it's played on a big system. You want that kind of feeling that something's underneath there, so I didn't want to just go like that and chop out all the bass. But we'll see, maybe we'll come back to that. And the delay is just a really short, well, not that short, 167 millisecond delay with a short feedback, and that's really just to try and add some colour to the sound rather than to give it any space or anything like that. And then here's before. So this last sound here is another kind of quite low mid heavy sound, which is getting quite hidden because the other sounds are kind of in that region. So I'm going to try and thin it out as much as I can without destroying it, and really kind of push it out wide, probably using some modulation delay or something like that. So let's have a little go at that. Okay, that's quite nice. That's giving it a nice bit of movement. I didn't use a delay at all. I used Brower Motion, which is essentially a panning plugin. So it's creating two movements around the stereo image, which gives, yeah, that nice sense of movement that I was looking for. I also thinned out the sound quite a bit. A big cut from 400 and below. Another one here at 150 just for good measure, and then a little boost 2.5K and above. I also put this automatic filter plugin on there, FabFilter Volcano, which just gave it a little bit more aggression and bite for those filter sweeps. So let me show you before and after. Oh, I also put on some delay. Again, it was the timeless, and I just tried a couple of presets until I got something that I liked. It's before. After, sorry. Here is before. Okay, so that's all the sounds kind of set roughly where they need to be. Now it'll be a case of listening through to the track and seeing what can come up and down at what time. One last thing I'm noticing is on the kick drum there's a little bit too much kind of low mids on it, I think, for my taste at least, so I'll chop a little bit out of that. But other than that, I'll start listening to the track and then I'll start thinking about some automation, turning some bits up and down. Okay, that's cleaned the kick up nicely, just that little touch there, and it's given it a bit more space. It's made the kick feel a lot more impressive. So I'm just gonna listen through to the track and try and write some automation as I go. I quite like that. So I was hearing at the beginning of this track, because I'm not listening to it really yet much, it's yeah, it's a bit bland compared to these sections here where there's not much going on. So I'm adding in some effects on the hi-hat just to come in for the beginning of this, just to add a little bit more interest and a bit more dimension to it. So that's not something I'm going to have on through the whole mix, but I'm just setting something up, now to automate. Right, near the beginning of the tune, this bass squelch note is a lot more prominent, so I'm going to allow it to dominate a lot more there. So I'm going to turn it up and make sure there's plenty of bass in there, because there's no kick drum for it to interfere with at that point in the tune. The way I will do that is with automation. So here's the bass that I've chopped out of it. What I'm going to do is turn that off, and I'm going to keep this brightness for now, but then I'm going to go to the point in the tune where I want this to kick in, and then I'm just going to turn it on at that point while I've got it on latch here. So one, two, three, four. Right, so now from that point on we've got this low cut in, but before here it's not going to be there anymore. But what I do want in is a big boost at the bottom end, and I want to turn the overall volume up as well. So what I'll do is this. Cool, that's more present now where I want it, so I'll go to the end of this intro and turn those bits off that I've just added there. One, two, three, four. Cool, and then remembering to turn it down as well. There we go. Okay, that's given me the automation that I want on this bass squelch note. For the bass arpeggio, I think at the beginning here it could be a bit more dynamic, so I'm going to put on a filter and manually automate the filter sweep frequency in and out, just to make it a little bit more interesting during that intro. Also think it could do with some reverb or something like that, but let's give this a go. that could really be done with going through the whole tune. So that would be something I would do if I was going to spend more time on this. So I'm also going to get like a bit more reverb on that hi-hat as well for this opening part, and also something on that big bass squelch note, just to fill out the space a bit better. Reverb. Oh, my little mistake there on the filter coming through. Let's sort that out quickly. So we can see where that is. It's just where the resonance, which is also called the peak, went over some threshold and started feeding back. There we go, that's sorted out. I like the sound of this reverb on the bass squelch note, so I think I'm going to automate that in and out, to be honest. I'll leave it on some nominal level. I like the idea of letting the attack come in dry and then whacking up the bus as the sound peters out or sustains. Let's automate that. Okay, so that could be automated through the whole tune, but I'm actually going to pull this bass squelch note back when this other fizz pad sounds enters, and maybe bring it back a bit later on, but for this time here, just to give us some variation so the sound isn't continuously going all the time. So what I've done there is I've just added a little effect, saturation effect onto the drum kit. Full beat squeeze is basically a whole bunch of different stuff in this plugin, but essentially it's a distortion plugin with different EQ segments and modulations and compressions and stereo image modification. So I've just put a tiny little bit of that in. It's broadened out the top end a little bit and just given the drums a lot more bite and kind of made them sound a little leaner but a little more direct. Okay, now I've got to this point. more or less looked at everything in the tune, give it one pass, and that's basically an hour that I've spent on it now. I would simply go through and start kind of tidying up what I've done already and seeing where I can enhance different things that I've done, or if I've gone too far, kind of rein it in a little bit. And that would be it really. Then I'd have a first version of the tune done, which take an hour or 2 hours, and then listen to it and come back to it later, maybe make some adjustments after I listen to it on a stereo or something like that. But hopefully that gives you an idea of roughly what you can do with this kind of DAWless jam output. Thanks for getting to the end of the video. I hope it was useful, informative, etc. Please subscribe to the channel and click like. That would help me out a little bit. And I'll see you later. Take care.